The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly in the cavernous office of Harrison and Associates, casting a sterile glow over the polished marble floors and sleek mahogany furniture. It was well past regular hours, the kind of late evening where the city outside hummed with distant traffic and the occasional siren, but inside the world was quiet, except for the soft clinking of cleaning supplies. Lily, a slight 12-year-old with a worn backpack slung over one shoulder, moved silently beside her mother Sarah as they navigated the executive floor. Sarah, dressed in a faded blue uniform, pushed a cleaning cart loaded with mops rags and bottles of disinfectant that gave off a sharp chemical scent. Her hands, rough from years of scrubbing floors and wiping down desks, moved with practiced efficiency as she emptied a trash bin into a black plastic liner. Lily, mimicking her mother's quiet diligence, knelt beside a wastebasket, her small hands gripping the plastic bag tightly, trying to stay invisible. She knew the rules: stay out of the way, don't touch anything expensive, and never, ever speak unless spoken to. The office was a world of glass walls and leather chairs, a place where powerful people made decisions that shaped lives, and Lily, with her second-hand sneakers and frayed hoodie, felt like an intruder in their domain. Sarah glanced at her daughter, her face etched with the exhaustion of a double shift. "Keep up, baby," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "We're almost done with this floor, then we can go home." Lily nodded, her dark eyes scanning the room as she tied off the trash bag. She was used to these late nights trailing behind her mother in buildings that felt like palaces, places where people like them were only noticed when something was out of place, a smudge on a window, a speck of dust on a desk. But Lily didn't mind the work. It gave her time to think, to listen, to observe. She had always been a watcher, soaking up the world around her like a sponge. At school, she was the quiet girl in the back row, the one teachers overlooked because she never raised her hand, even though she knew the answers. At home, in their cramped apartment in a noisy housing complex, she was the girl who stayed up late with her phone, not scrolling through social media like her classmates, but teaching herself things no one expected a kid like her to know. Tonight, the executive floor was nearly empty, save for one office where the lights burned brighter than the rest. The nameplate on the door read, "James Lee Sr., Consultant," and inside Lily could hear voices sharp, clipped, and unfamiliar. She paused, her hands still on the trash bag as the sounds drifted through the half-open door. The words weren't English. They were rapid, melodic, with tones that rose and fell like a song. Mandarin. Lily realized, her heart quickening. She had been teaching herself Mandarin for over a year, piecing it together from free language apps, YouTube videos, and conversations with Mrs. Chen, an elderly neighbor who ran a small grocery store in their building. Mrs. Chen had fled to the U.S. years ago, and she'd taken a liking to Lily, teaching her phrases over cups of jasmine tea while Lily helped translate forms for other immigrants in their community. Lily's phone, tucked in her pocket, was filled with apps like Duolingo and Plico, and she'd spent countless nights listening to Chinese news podcasts, mimicking the broadcasters' pronunciations until she could follow along without subtitles. Inside the office, James Lee stood tall and imposing, his tailored suit catching the light as he leaned over a glass desk, speaking rapidly into a phone. His voice was low, almost a growl, and his assistant, a wiry man with slicked-back hair, nodded along, jotting notes on a tablet. James's presence filled the room like a storm cloud, expensive cologne, a gleaming watch, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He barely glanced at Sarah as she slipped into the office to empty his wastebasket, her movements quick and unobtrusive. Lily followed, keeping her head down, but her ears were sharp, catching every word James spoke. "Tamen Yidian du Bujidao," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "These Americans are fools. They'll sign the contract without a second thought, and in 30 days, the project will be ours." His assistant smirked, replying in Mandarin, "Haha tamen, zinmei hui chajue, women yijingzai, heping li kangle suoyu de xianjing." Lily's hands froze on the trash bag. She understood every word. They were talking about hiding traps in a contract, something about taking control of a project and leaving the Americans clueless. Her pulse raced, but she kept her face blank, her fingers moving mechanically to tie off the bag. James kicked the wastebasket, sending a cascade of crumpled papers across the marble floor. "Get this mess out of my sight," he snapped in English, his eyes flicking to Sarah, but landing on Lily. He muttered something under his breath in Mandarin, "Zega xiao lese gentama yi yang mei yong." Lily's stomach twisted. He'd called her a little piece of trash, useless like her mother. The words stung, sharp and cold, but she didn't flinch. She knelt to pick up the scattered papers, her small hands trembling slightly as she gathered them. Sarah, oblivious to the insult, shot her a warning look. Don't make a scene. But Lily wasn't just hurt. She was listening. James continued his phone conversation, oblivious to the girl he'd dismissed as nothing. "Wu yi USD tamen hui ba quan bu qian jiao gay women," he said, his voice smug. $500 million, and they'll hand it over without a fight. The housing project. We'll tear it down and build resorts for the elite. Those poor families can rot elsewhere." His assistant laughed, adding, "Tamen de lushi yijingbei, woman shumel. Yu ge nebu, ren yi kie du anpai haole." Lily's breath caught. They'd bribed a lawyer inside the company. This wasn't just talk, it was a plan, a calculated betrayal. Lily's mind raced as she stacked the papers neatly, her movements slow to buy time. She knew about the housing project James mentioned. It was the one her friend Jamal's family was counting on a chance for them to move out of their overcrowded apartment. The Gonzalez kids, too, had been promised rooms of their own in the new development. Lily had seen the flyers at the community center, heard the excitement in her neighbors' voices. This project wasn't just a business deal, it was hope for people like her people who lived in crumbling buildings with leaky pipes and flickering lights. And James Lee was planning to destroy it, to turn their dreams into luxury condos for the rich. Lily's heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral, her eyes fixed on the floor. She couldn't let them know she understood. Not yet. Sarah finished wiping down James's desk and motioned for Lily to follow her out. As they stepped into the hallway, the heavy glass door swung shut behind them, muffling James's voice, but not the weight of what Lily had heard. The cleaning cart rattled as they moved to the next office, and Sarah sighed, wiping sweat from her brow. "You okay, baby?" she asked, noticing Lily's silence. Lily nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying James's words. She clutched her phone in her pocket, her fingers itching to open her language apps to double-check the legal terms. She'd caught phrases like yin kang tiao quan, hidden clauses, and kongji quan juanrang, transfer of control. She wasn't sure she could trust her ears, but deep down she knew she was right. She'd understood every syllable, every nuance, and what she'd heard, it wasn't just an insult, it was a crime. Back in the storage closet, surrounded by the sharp smell of bleach and the clatter of mops, Lily finally spoke. "Mama," she whispered, glancing at the door to make sure no one was listening. "That man, Mr. Lee, he said bad things." Sarah didn't look up from counting inventory sheets, her pen scratching against the clipboard. "Baby, you know better than to listen to grown folks' business. Just keep your head down." Lily's voice trembled as she stepped closer. "He said he's going to steal Mr. Harrison's money. $500 million. Sarah froze her pen, hovering over the checklist. "What are you talking about, Lily? You don't even speak Chinese." Lily's words tumbled out in a rush. "Yes, I do, Mama. He called me trash, said you're useless, said Americans are stupid, and he's going to trick them with fake contracts." The pen slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering to the concrete floor. "Baby girl, that's impossible." "You've never learned," Lily cut her off, pulling out her phone and scrolling to her apps. "I taught myself. Apps videos Mrs. Chen from downstairs. She teaches me Mandarin, and I help her translate for the new families. I learned it, Mama. I understood every word." Sarah stared at her daughter, her eye twisted with disbelief. She'd always known Lily was bright, too. Bright for their small apartment, too bright for the run-down school she attended, but this was something else. "You really understood what that man was saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "He's going to hurt people, Mama." "The housing project, that's where Jamal's family was supposed to move, where the Gonzalez kids could have their own rooms. He wants to tear it down for rich people." Sarah sank onto an overturned bucket, her hands shaking. She'd worked at Harrison and Associates for years, scrubbing floors, cleaning up after men like James Lee, who never even saw her. Speaking up could cost her job, their health insurance, the fragile stability they'd built. But looking at Lily's determined face, she saw something new. A fire in her daughter's eyes, a strength she hadn't noticed before. "What exactly did he say?" baby Sarah asked, her voice steadying. Lily took a deep breath, her small frame straightening. "He said the contract has hidden clauses. After 30 days, he gets control, not Mr. Harrison. And if they try to stop him, they'll owe him $200 million. He's done this before, Mama, to other companies, and he's got someone inside helping him." The closet felt smaller, the air heavier as Sarah processed her daughter's words. She'd always told Lily to stay quiet, to stay safe, to avoid trouble in a world that didn't look kindly on people like them. But this wasn't just trouble. This was a crime that could destroy lives, including their own. "We have to tell someone," Lily said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "We have to tell Mr. Harrison." Sarah's hands twisted the cleaning rag. She still held her mind racing. David Harrison was the head of the company, a man who'd always been kind but distant, someone who lived in a world far removed from theirs. Would he listen to a cleaning lady and her 12-year-old daughter, baby? "He's not going to believe us," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "We're just—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Lily's eyes locked onto hers, fierce and unyielding. "Just what, Mama? Just cleaning ladies?" "Just nobody." The question hung in the air like a challenge, daring Sarah to see her daughter for who she really was, not just a kid, but a force, a mind sharper than anyone in that gleaming office upstairs. Sarah stood smoothing her uniform, her decision made. "Okay, baby. We'll go to Mr. Harrison, but you have to be sure, Lily. You have to be absolutely sure." Lily nodded, her small hand slipping into her mother's. As they pushed the cleaning cart back into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Lily felt the weight of what she was about to do, the risk of stepping into a world that had always pushed her aside. But she also felt something else, a spark of purpose, a certainty that she wasn't just the cleaning lady's daughter, not just a shadow in the background. She was Lily, the girl who understood every word, the girl who could stop a crime, the girl who might just change everything. The elevator dinged as they stepped inside, heading for the top floor, where David Harrison's office waited. Lily clutched her phone, her heart pounding with the knowledge that in a few hours she might be the only thing standing between James Lee and his $500 million lie. The elevator ride to the top floor of Harrison and Associates felt like an eternity, the soft hum of the machinery doing little to calm Lily's racing heart. She stood beside her mother, Sarah, whose hands gripped the cleaning cart so tightly her knuckles paled. The cart's wheels squeaked faintly, a reminder of their place in this world of polished glass and gleaming chrome. Lily's worn sneakers scuffed the elevator floor, and her backpack heavy with school books, and her phone felt like an anchor. She glanced at Sarah, whose face was a mask of worry, her lips pressed into a thin line. Lily knew what her mother was thinking. This was a risk, a gamble that could cost them everything. A cleaning lady and her 12-year-old daughter didn't just walk into the office of David Harrison, the firm's president, with accusations against a man like James Lee. But Lily's mind was sharp with purpose, replaying the Mandarin words she'd overheard, hidden clauses, a 30-day takeover, a $200 million penalty. She wasn't wrong. She couldn't be wrong. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, revealing the executive suite, a world of plush carpets and modern art that felt as foreign to Lily as a distant country. Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering over the cart. "Lily, you sure about this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the faint hum of the air conditioning. Lily nodded, her dark eyes steady. "I'm sure, Mama. We have to do this." Sarah took a deep breath, smoothing her uniform, and pushed the cart forward, her steps deliberate but heavy. They approached David Harrison's office, its glass door etched with his name in elegant gold lettering. The security guard Marcus stood nearby, his hand resting casually on his radio. He raised an eyebrow as Sarah approached her cleaning rag, still clutched in one hand. "Ma'am, Mr. Harrison didn't authorize any," he began, but a voice cut him off from inside the office. "It's okay, Marcus." David Harrison stepped into the doorway, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, a man who looked more tired than powerful tonight. His graying hair caught the light, and his eyes, sharp but kind, landed on Sarah with curiosity. "Mrs. Williams, is everything all right? It's quite late." Sarah's hands twisted the rag, her voice faltering. "Mr. Harrison, sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but my daughter, she says she heard something important about your deal with Mr. Lee." David's eyebrows lifted, his gaze shifting to Lily, who stood half hidden behind her mother, her backpack slung low. She looked small, almost fragile, in the oversized office, her hoodie frayed at the cuffs. "Your daughter, David," said, his tone gentle but skeptical. "Come in, both of you." He gestured to the office, its leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows exuding wealth and authority. Lily followed her mother inside, the scent of expensive coffee and polished wood enveloping her. She perched on the edge of an oversized chair, her feet barely touching the ground, while Sarah stood awkwardly near the door, still clutching her rag like a lifeline. David settled behind his desk, his hands clasped, his expression open but guarded. "Now what's this about?" he asked, his eyes on Lily. Lily took a deep breath, her voice quiet but clear. "The man with the fancy watch, Mr. Lee, he spoke in Chinese. He said things." She paused, glancing at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "He said you're a fool, that Americans are stupid and easy to trick. He's planning to steal your money through fake contract words." David's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth, his eyes narrowing. He exchanged a glance with Sarah, then leaned forward, his voice gentle but tinged with doubt. "Sweetheart, I don't think you understand. Chinese is a complicated language, and sometimes grown-ups use big words that sound scary," but Lily straightened her small frame, rigid with determination. She switched to Mandarin, her pronunciation crisp and flawless. "Tashuo, women jiang kong jege yuchun de gongsi na zu yikie." That means, we'll take everything from this stupid company. David's cup clattered onto the saucer, his eyes wide. He said the real contract gives him control after 30 days, not you. And there's hidden words that make you pay penalties if you try to stop him. Sarah gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. David stared at Lily, his mind racing to process what he'd just heard, a 12-year-old girl speaking Mandarin with the precision of a native. Where? How do you know? Chinese, David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lily pulled out her phone, her fingers moving swiftly to open a news app. She played a clip from a Chinese news broadcast, the rapid Mandarin filling the room. As the reporter spoke, Lily translated simultaneously, her voice steady. The reporter is saying the Chinese government passed new trade regulations. Critics argue it hides corruption in infrastructure deals. David's jaw dropped. The translation was flawless, capturing not just the words but the context, the political undertones. YouTube mostly, Lily said, shrugging as if it were nothing. And Mrs. Chen downstairs teaches me. I help translate for immigrant kids at the community center. She scrolled to another app showing a history of language learning tools and videos. I started with Spanish for the kids at school whose parents couldn't talk to teachers. Then Chinese when the new families moved into our building. Sarah stared at her daughter, tears welling in her eyes. She'd known Lily was smart. But this was beyond anything she'd imagined. David leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. Lily, what exactly did Mr. Lee say about our deal? He asked, his tone serious now. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. He used special Chinese lawyer words mixed with regular talking to confuse any translator you might hire. He said the contract gives him control after 30 days, not shared management like you think. And this word here, she pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack, where she'd jotted down a phrase in Chinese characters. This says Wan Quan Suo Yu Quan, which means complete ownership, not partnership. Your translator probably missed it because he used an old dialect word from Shanghai. David's hands trembled as he took the paper, his eyes scanning the characters he couldn't read. He reached for a folder on his desk, pulling out the Arabic sections of the contract. Can you look at this? He asked, sliding it toward her. Lily scanned the pages quickly, her finger tracing the text. Right here, she said, pointing to a paragraph. This says temporary partnership, but in the legal structure, temporary actually means until transfer of authority. And this line, she tapped another section. It says you'll owe $200 million if you try to cancel after 30 days. David's face paled. He set the contract down, his hands shaking. Lily, there's more, isn't there? He asked, his voice tight. She nodded, her eyes meeting his. He said he's done this before to other American companies. He laughed about how easy it is because Americans don't learn Chinese well enough to catch him. And? She hesitated, her voice barely audible. He said he has a lawyer in your company already paid to help him, if anything goes wrong. The room fell silent, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. Sarah looked as stunned as David, her rag forgotten in her hand. David's fingers hovered over his phone, his mind racing. Mrs. Williams, he said, finally, his voice steady but urgent. Your daughter may have just saved our company from the biggest fraud in our history. He stood pacing the room, his expression a mix of awe and determination. The signing is tomorrow. Lee moved it up, didn't he? Lily nodded. He said he wants to finish the Americans before they get suspicious. David stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto Lily's. We need a plan. Lily, can you help us? Can you listen to him tomorrow? Tell us what he's saying? Lily's heart pounded, but she nodded, her small hands clenched into fists. Yes, sir, I can do that. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. Mr. Harrison, She's just a child. This is dangerous." David turned to her, his expression softening. "I know Mrs. Williams, and I promise I'll keep her safe. But Lily, she's not just a child. She's extraordinary." He looked back at Lily, who sat small but resolute in the oversized chair. "We'll have her sit in the meeting, maybe with a tablet, looking like she's just there with you while you clean. She can signal us if she hears anything. Will that work?" Lily nodded again, her mind already racing with ideas. She'd seen drawing apps on her phone, ones she used to doodle with her friends. She could use one to send signals colors for truth, lies, important details. It would look innocent, like a kid playing games. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for Lily's shoulder, her eyes filled with pride and fear. "Baby, are you sure you can handle this?" Lily looked up, her expression fierce. "Mama, I learned Chinese to help people like Mrs. Chen, like the kids at the center who can't talk to their teachers. If I can help them, I can help Mr. Harrison. I can stop Mr. Lee." David smiled, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Lily, you're going to be our secret weapon. But we need to be careful. Lee's smart, and if he suspects anything—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Lily understood. She'd seen the coldness in James Lee's eyes, the way he'd dismissed her as nothing. He'd underestimated her, and that was his mistake. "I'll be careful," she said, her voice steady. David nodded, picking up his phone. "I need to call my legal team now. Mrs. Williams, Lily, stay here tonight. We'll set up a plan, and tomorrow we'll face Lee together." As David dialed his team, Lily sat back in the chair, her mind buzzing. She thought of Mrs. Chen, who'd taught her Mandarin over cups of tea, telling stories of her life in Shanghai. She thought of the immigrant kids at the community center, the ones she helped with forms and letters, their faces lighting up when someone finally understood them. She thought of her mother, working late nights to keep them afloat, never complaining, even when her hands ached. And she thought of James Lee laughing in Mandarin about how easy it was to fool people who didn't look like him, didn't speak his language. Lily's fingers tightened around her phone. She wasn't just a kid, not just the cleaning lady's daughter. She was someone who could make a difference, someone who could stop a crime, someone who could protect the people she loved. The office lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the room. Tomorrow, Lily would walk into a conference room full of powerful people armed with nothing but her mind and her courage. And she was ready. The conference room at Harrison and Associates buzzed with a nervous energy, its long mahogany table gleaming under the soft glow of recessed lighting. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and the faint hum of anticipation as executives shuffled papers and adjusted their ties. Lily sat in a corner, her small frame nearly swallowed by the oversized chair, her tablet propped on her lap. To anyone watching, she was just a kid doodling on a drawing app, her crayons scattered on the floor beside her. Her worn backpack rested against the wall, and her mother, Sarah, stood nearby, pretending to polish a glass panel with a rag. But Lily's heart pounded like a drum, her fingers hovering over the tablet screen, ready to send signals to David Harrison. The plan was simple but nerve-wracking. She'd listen to James Lee's Mandarin conversations, catch any lies or hidden details, and signal David with colored dots on her app. Red for lies, blue for critical information, green for truth. She'd practiced all night, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, but her mind was sharp, fueled by the memory of James's cruel words and his plan to steal $500 million. David stood at the head of the table, his posture calm, but his eyes darting to Lily every few seconds. The senior partners, Margaret Foster, Robert Carter and James Sullivan sat stiffly, their faces a mix of skepticism and unease. They'd reluctantly agreed to let Lily stay, but their trust in her was thin, their earlier dismissal of her as the cleaning lady's daughter still lingering in the air. The glass doors swung open, and James Lee strode in his tailored suit, impeccable, his gold watch catching the light. His assistant, a sharp-eyed man named Victor, followed, carrying a sleek briefcase. James's smile was all charm, but Lily caught the cold edge in his eyes, the same look he'd given her when he'd kicked the wastebasket and called her Xiao Lezi little trash. He spoke rapidly in Mandarin to Victor as they settled at the table, his voice low but clear. Yikie du an pai haole, tamen hai meyu ren he xiansuo. Everything is set. They still have no clue. Lily's finger moved across her tablet, drawing a red dot that pinged silently on David's phone. She kept her face blank, coloring a butterfly with pink and purple strokes, her small hands steady, despite the storm inside her. David cleared his throat, his voice smooth. Gentlemen, welcome. Ready to finalize this partnership? James nodded, his smile unwavering. Of course, Mr. Harrison, though I must say some of these contract terms seem quite favorable to your company. Perhaps too favorable. His tone was light, testing, probing for weakness. Victor whispered in Mandarin, Tamen keneng hui tiwenti. Dan women de heping yijing wan mi yin kang. They might ask questions, but our contract is perfectly hidden. Lily tapped a blue dot, her butterfly gaining a bright blue wing. David glanced at his phone, his expression unchanged. Actually, James, I think the terms are fair as written. 50-50 partnership, shared decision-making, equal profit distribution standard, international joint venture structure. James's face twitched almost imperceptibly. He hadn't expected David to push back so confidently. Let's review Section 47B. David continued, his voice casual. The subsidiary management structure. Lily's heart skipped. Section 47B was one of the traps she'd flagged, a clause that appeared to outline shared control, but actually handed James authority after 30 days. James's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. That section is straightforward, he said in English, but he turned to Victor and muttered in Mandarin, Tazinme jidao jege bufen yuren gao su tama. How does he know about that section? Did someone tell him? Red dot, blue dot. Lily's fingers flew across her tablet, her butterfly now a chaotic mix of colors that would look like childish scribbles to anyone else. David's phone buzzed softly, and he smiled, his voice calm. Is there a problem with 47B, James? James recovered quickly, his smile returning. No problem at all. Though perhaps we could discuss the timeline modifications. He launched into a complex explanation in English peppered with Mandarin asides to Victor. Gaibian Shijian Xian. Rang Tamen Juede Tamen Yinglei. Change the timeline. Make them think they're winning. Lily drew a blue dot, then a red one, her crayon pressing harder into the digital canvas. The butterfly's wings were a mess now, but her signals were clear. David glanced at his phone and raised an eyebrow. Interesting. So you're proposing to accelerate the timeline from 6 months to 30 days? That's quite aggressive. James froze his hand, pausing mid-gesture. He hadn't mentioned the 30-day timeline in English. Zinmei keneng ta tingdao shenmei lei. How is this possible? What did he hear? He hissed to Victor, his voice low but urgent. Red dot. Lily's heart raced, but she kept her eyes on her tablet, coloring a new shape, a house with a clock labeled 30 days. Victor leaned closer to James, whispering, Yu Jiandie. Women biksu xiaoxin. There's a spy. We need to be careful. Blue dot. James's eyes swept the room, scanning the senior partners, the legal assistants, David himself. Then they landed on Lily, sitting quietly in the corner, her tablet glowing with bright colors. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She forced herself to look away, adding a green dot to her drawing, pretending to be absorbed in her game. James's lips curled into a faint sneer, and he turned back to David. "Mr. Harrison, I'd prefer we continue this discussion privately. There are unauthorized persons present." His eyes flicked to Lily, his voice dripping with disdain. David's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone even. "She's with her mother, who's finishing up cleaning. They're not disturbing anyone." James's smile vanished, his voice turning sharp. "I insist. This is a sensitive negotiation." He switched to Mandarin, speaking to Victor. "Zege xiao nuhai rang wo bu shufu. Reng tali kai. This little girl makes me uncomfortable. Get her out." Lily's hand trembled, but she drew another red dot, her butterfly now a kaleidoscope of warnings. David's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression hardening. "James, she stays." James slammed his hand on the table, his composure cracking. "Then we have no deal." He began gathering his documents, his movements jerky, his face flushed. Victor whispered urgently, "Laoban women kei chiugai haping buyao fangki." "Boss, we can revise the contract. Don't give up." Blue dot. Lily's fingers moved faster, her heart pounding as she recorded their words, her app silently capturing every Mandarin phrase. David leaned forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "Before you walk away, James, let's discuss the real terms you're proposing. All of them, in detail." He slid the contract across the table, pointing to Section 47B. "This clause, for example, it says temporary partnership, but my understanding is that it transfers full control after 30 days. Care to clarify?" James's face went pale, his hands freezing on the briefcase. "Ni zin majidao jege," he muttered to Victor, his voice barely audible. "How does he know this? Red dot, blue dot." Lily's tablet was a storm of signals now, her fingers shaking as she drew a clock with 200 mems written beside it, signaling the penalty clause. Margaret Foster, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward, her glasses glinting. "David, how are you getting this information?" she whispered, her eyes darting to Lily. Robert Carter, still skeptical, muttered, "This is absurd. Are we really trusting a kid?" But David ignored them, his focus on James. "And the penalty structure, James. $200 million if we try to cancel. That's not in the English version." "Why is that?" James's eyes widened, his composure crumbling. "Je bu keneng tamen bu keneng dong jongwen. This is impossible. They can't understand Chinese," he hissed to Victor, his voice rising. Red dot. Blue dot. Lily's heart thundered, but she kept coloring her face, a mask of innocence. James stood his chair, scraping against the floor. "Who's feeding you this?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping the room again, landing on Lily. He took a step toward her, his voice deceptively gentle. "Little girl, what are you drawing?" Lily looked up, her eyes wide and guileless. "A butterfly," she said, tilting her tablet to show the chaotic mess of colors. James knelt beside her, his expensive cologne, overwhelming. "Niming bai, women's eye, shoshen mei, ma, do you understand what we're saying?" he asked in Mandarin, his tone soft but laced with menace. Lily blinked, her face blank. "Are you talking to me, Mr. I only speak English and a little Spanish from school?" James's eyes narrowed, searching her face for a crack, a hint of understanding. Lily's hand trembled, but she added a purple stroke to her butterfly, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. Tabudong, Victor whispered, "She doesn't understand." James relaxed slightly, but his eyes lingered on Lily, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He stood, turning back to David. "This is a misunderstanding. Let's revise the contract and proceed." But Lily wasn't done. She tapped her tablet, opening a recording she'd made during the meeting, her app silently capturing every Mandarin word. She sent it to David's phone, a blue dot flashing on his screen. David glanced at it, his expression unreadable, then played the recording. James's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "Women jang kong jege yuchunde gongsi nazo yikie. Tamen dui zhongwen yi wu suo ji. We'll take everything from this stupid company. They know nothing about Chinese." The senior partners gasped, their faces paling. James staggered back, his briefcase slipping from his hand. "What? What is this?" he stammered. David stood, his voice like steel. "This is evidence, James. Evidence of fraud, bribery, and intent to deceive. The deal is off, and I'm reporting this to the authorities." Lily's tablet slipped from her lap, her hands shaking as she realized what she'd done. She'd caught him, recorded every word, exposed his entire plan. James's eyes locked onto her, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "You," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It was you." Lily stood, her small frame trembling, but her voice steady. "You called me trash, Mr. Lee. You said my mama was useless. But while you were laughing, I was listening." The room went silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Margaret Foster's hand flew to her mouth, and Robert Carter stared at Lily like he was seeing her for the first time. David placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, his voice calm but proud. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Lily, the girl who just saved our company from a $500 million fraud." As security guards entered to escort James and Victor out, Lily sat back down, her butterfly drawing forgotten. She'd done it. She'd stopped him. And in that moment, she wasn't just the cleaning lady's daughter, she was a hero. The conference room at Harrison and Associates was a far cry from the tense battleground it had been a year ago. Today, it was filled with a different kind of energy, hopeful, vibrant, alive with possibility. The long mahogany table was covered with folders and name tags, and the walls were adorned with banners reading, "The Lily Williams Foundation, Empowering Hidden Potential." Teenagers and their families filled the seats, their faces a mix of nervous excitement and pride. Some wore hand-me-down clothes, others carried backpacks patched with duct tape, but their eyes sparkled with dreams that refused to be dimmed. Lily, now 13, stood at the front of the room, her small frame dressed in a simple navy dress, her hair neatly braided. She was no longer the invisible girl trailing her mother with a trash bag. She was Dr. Lily Williams, Chief Youth Linguistic Consultant, a title engraved on a brass nameplate outside her office down the hall. Her desk, child-sized to fit her frame, sat beside a larger one, piled with documents in 5 languages, her calculus homework tucked neatly to one side. The walls of her office displayed certificates from the FBI, the State Department, and universities offering early admission. But the centerpiece was a framed photo, Lily teaching Mandarin to a group of immigrant children at the community center, their laughter frozen in time. Lily's mother, Sarah, stood near the back of the conference room, no longer in a cleaning uniform, but in a crisp blazer, her new role as Director of Community Outreach suiting her quiet strength. She watched her daughter with a mix of awe and pride, her eyes glistening as Lily stepped to the podium. A year ago, Sarah had feared speaking up would cost them everything: her job, their health insurance, their fragile stability. Now she was witnessing her daughter, change the world. David Harrison stood beside her, his suit less formal today, his smile warm as he leaned in. "She's something else, isn't she?" he whispered. Sarah nodded, wiping a tear. "Always was. I just didn't know the world would see it." The room quieted as Lily adjusted the microphone, her small hands steady despite the weight of every eye on her. She glanced at the crowd, teenagers like Jamal, whose family had secured a home in the housing project she'd saved, Maria Gonzalez, who now had her own room, a homeless honors student clutching a scholarship letter, a young mother working toward her GED, a boy with learning disabilities whose math skills rivaled college professors. They were all here because of her, because she'd seen what others hadn't. Lily took a deep breath, her voice clear and confident. "A year ago, a powerful man looked at me and saw nothing but a kid who didn't belong." She began, her words carrying a quiet authority. "He called me trash, said my mama was useless, thought I was too young, too poor, too different to matter. He was wrong." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. But here's what I learned: he wasn't wrong because I'm special. He was wrong because every person in this room is special. Every one of you has gifts the world needs, even if the world doesn't see them yet. She paused, her eyes scanning the faces before her. "I taught myself Mandarin to help kids at the community center who couldn't talk to their teachers, families who needed forms translated, neighbors like Mrs. Chen, who just wanted someone to listen. I didn't do it to be smart or to prove anything. I did it because when people can't understand each other, bad things happen. Families get separated, dreams get crushed. People like that man think they can take everything because no one's listening." She stepped away from the podium, holding up her worn notebook, its pages filled with Chinese characters, Spanish vocabulary, Korean phrases, all in her careful handwriting. "This is where it started," she said, flipping it open. "Late nights, free apps, YouTube videos, Mrs. Chen's stories over tea. I learned 8 languages not because I wanted to be famous, but because I wanted to help. And when I heard that man James Lee planning to steal $500 million, planning to tear down homes for kids like me, I knew I had to speak up." The audience leaned forward, captivated. It wasn't easy. People didn't believe me at first. They said I was too young, that I was making it up, that a cleaning lady's daughter couldn't possibly understand a complicated language like Chinese. But I kept going because I knew the truth, and I knew it mattered. She smiled a small, determined smile. "And you know what? You have that power too. Every one of you. The hardest part isn't proving you're smart enough or good enough. The hardest part is believing it yourself when everyone else says you're not." The room erupted in applause, slow at first, then thunderous. A teenage girl in the front row, clutching a scholarship letter, wiped tears from her eyes. Lily continued, her voice growing stronger. "Today, the Lily Williams Foundation is giving scholarships to 15 students who were nominated because someone saw their potential, even when others didn't. But this isn't just about them. It's about all of us learning to see differently. Look around your schools, your workplaces, your communities. Who are you not seeing? Whose voice are you not hearing? Whose potential are you missing because they don't look like what you expect a genius to look like?" She paused, letting the question settle. The next time you see someone cleaning an office, ask yourself, what languages do they speak? The next time you pass a kid sitting quietly in a corner, ask yourself, what are they thinking about? The next time someone seems different from you, ask yourself, what can they teach me? Lily's eyes softened as she looked at her mother. "My mama always said our minds are gifts, but gifts are meant to be shared, not hidden. So I'm asking you, yes, you, what will you do differently tomorrow? Will you notice someone you've been overlooking? Will you listen to someone you've been dismissing? Will you see potential where others see problems? The room was silent again, her words sinking deep. Because somewhere out there is another kid like me, sitting quietly, understanding more than anyone realizes, waiting for someone to see them. Don't make them wait too long. She stepped back, her small frame commanding the room, and the applause roared again, filling the space with a warmth that felt like hope. David took the podium, his voice thick with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lily Williams, the youngest consultant in our firm's history, and the person who saved us from a $500 million fraud. But more than that, she's shown us what courage and wisdom look like. He turned to Lily, his eyes shining. Lily, you didn't just save our company. You reminded us that intelligence doesn't come with a suit or a degree. It comes with heart. He gestured to the scholarship recipients. These young people are proof of that. A homeless student who aces every test. A young mother studying for her GED between night shifts. A boy whose dyslexia hid his mathematical genius. A deaf girl whose sign language skills could bridge nations. They're here because Lily's story inspired us to look closer to see potential where we'd missed it before. As the ceremony continued, Lily slipped to the back of the room where Sarah enveloped her in a hug. "I'm so proud of you, baby Sarah," whispered her voice breaking. Lily hugged her back, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. "You always knew, Mama. You just didn't know they'd listen." Nearby, David introduced a special guest, his daughter Emma, a shy blonde girl clutching a soccer ball. She approached Lily, hesitantly, her eyes wide with awe. "Dad says you speak like 1,000,000 languages," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily grinned, closing her notebook. "Only 12 fluently, but I'm working on Mandarin some more." She pointed to Emma's soccer ball. "Nichihuan Zukuma." That means, do you like soccer? My friend Layla taught me the sports words when she moved here from Beijing. Emma's face lit up. "Can you teach me to say goal in different languages?" For the next hour, the two girls sat cross-legged on the conference room floor, giggling as Lily taught Emma words in Mandarin, Spanish, and Korean, while Emma demonstrated soccer kicks. Margaret Foster, the senior partner who'd once called Lily a fantasist, approached cautiously, her designer glasses glinting. "Lily," she said, her voice soft, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. Would you consider teaching some of us basic Mandarin? We have gaps in our international capabilities." Lily looked up, her smile gentle but firm. "Of course, Mrs. Foster. Learning languages is fun. Even grown-ups can do it if they try really hard." The innocence of her response, free of the malice Foster had shown her, brought tears to the woman's eyes. Robert Carter. Another skeptic-turned-believer shook his head in disbelief. "Kid, you're going to run this place someday," he muttered, and Lily just shrugged, her focus back on Emma. As the ceremony wound down, David pulled Lily aside, his expression serious but warm. "Lily, I want you to know something. When I was your age, I was underestimated too. Grew up in a trailer park, parents working jobs like your mama's. People told me I'd never be a lawyer, that I should aim lower. But you're proof that being underestimated is a superpower." Lily tilted her head, her eyes curious. How David smiled, kneeling to her level. "Because when people expect nothing, you can surprise them. You did that. You saved us not just from fraud, but from our own blindness. My daughter Emma, she's smart, but she comes home crying sometimes because kids tease her for reading too much. If anyone dismissed her the way we almost dismissed you, I'd be heartbroken." Lily fidgeted with her notebook, her voice soft. Kids at school think I'm weird because I like languages more than social media. But I don't care. I like helping people. David's smile widened. That's why you're special, Lily. You didn't learn Mandarin to show off. You learned it to serve others. That's wisdom, not just intelligence. The room began to empty, families hugging their scholarship recipients, reporters snapping photos for news stories already spreading. Online, teen genius exposes 500 builder fraud. Cleaning lady's daughter saves. Law firm child prodigy. Outsmarts criminal. Lily ignored the cameras, her focus on a group of immigrant kids who'd come to support her, their faces familiar from the community center. She slipped away to join them, pulling out her notebook to help with a translation for a new family. Sarah watched, her heart swelling. She's still my baby, she whispered to David. He nodded his eyes on Lily. And she's our hero. Let's make sure she gets to be a kid, too. He handed Sarah a folder. Full educational support for Lily College, paid for whatever she wants. And for you, a promotion. You're not just community outreach, you're family. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her voice steady. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for seeing her. As the last guests left, Lily sat in David's oversized chair behind the conference table, her small frame dwarfed, but her presence undeniable. She opened her notebook, scribbling a new Mandarin phrase she'd learned from a podcast that morning. The world outside was already buzzing with her story, but for Lily, it wasn't about fame. It was about the kids she'd helped, the homes she'd saved, the voices she'd amplified. She looked up at the photo on the wall, her teaching at the community center, and smiled. A year ago, she'd been invisible, a girl called Trash, by a man who thought he could steal everything. Now, she was a beacon proof that talent wore no suit, that intelligence needed no degree, that worth had nothing to do with a paycheck. And somewhere out there, another kid was watching, waiting for their moment to be seen. Lily's smile widened. She'd make sure they didn't wait too long.